So this workshop is going to basically be like a very sort of stripped back outline of filmmaking. It's just going to be a really simple introduction into making films, short films and videos for a variety of different uses. Basically using everything from your phone to other cameras, but with a real emphasis on DIY. So the equipment I'll kind of be talking about and using later on, I'll be using my smartphone, which is just an iPhone. You don't have to have any of this. You don't have to have the phone today to do the workshop, or the Adobe Premiere Rush app to do the workshop. It's just if you want to later on try it out for yourself, we're going to have that option. And so the Adobe Premiere Rush app is just a video editing app, and it should be available on pretty much all platforms. But don't worry if your phone can't have this app for any reason. There's a bunch of other great video editing apps that are also free. So we can chat about that as well later on. So just a little bit about myself, just so you know that I kind of know what I'm talking about a little bit. So I actually studied art in Perth College a few years ago. And so I always came into filmmaking from a totally creative point of view, from a DIY kind of ethos. And through art, I eventually got into studying digital filmmaking at a place called the SEE Institute in Glasgow. So I was there and I got a BA honours degree there, and I made a bunch of short films. I made like a short film musical. It was really, really good fun. And that kind of led on to me getting an internship with a production company in Edinburgh called Plum Films for about 9 months. And there I worked on a bunch of different productions, commercials, online campaigns for different companies. And that gave me like really good industry insight. And that was more the traditional film industry insight. And so I've kind of been shown DIY industry and the feeling of the best of both worlds. But since the summer of 2018, I've been freelance as a filmmaker, working with a bunch of different clients across the UK and internationally, and a bunch of different production companies. And in 2019, I filmed my very life documentary film about speedway motorcycle racing. And last year, it was released on YouTube and also across a couple of film festivals. So let me show you just this wee video of some of my work, just so we've got a little bit more interesting visuals to kind of look at as I'm chatting. So yeah, I kind of film everything myself pretty much. So wearing a couple of different hats, from filming behind the camera to editing to directing people, whether it's on documentaries or fictional work or commercials, you know, kind of planned narrative scripted work. And so, yeah, I've also worked with other production companies as kind of like a helping hand on the camera side and in the editing side, which has been really, really good fun. I'm working on a number of different scale things. So yeah, my ethos has always kind of been DIY as well. So yeah, I think that's enough about myself. So here's a very, very brief introduction into filmmaking. So I've tried to kind of categorize these just so you get a very, very quick insight into it. So the most common kind of films that people refer to are feature films that are more than 40 minutes, probably more than 60 minutes. And then you've also got short films. These are shorter than 40 minutes. Typically ranging between 5 to 10 and 20 minutes. And a lot of the time you'll be seeing short films mostly in the cinema before a Pixar film or like a Disney film. That's really the most common time that you'll see it, or in film festivals, if you're into film festivals. And then you've got ads and promos or commercials, which are mostly seen on TV. These are 30 seconds to like a minute long. They could even be shorter. They're often seen interrupting your YouTube videos nowadays as well. And you've also got YouTube or the vlog, video blogs. And these are all kind of user-generated content pretty much. From social media videos to like diary kind of videos, and they can be any lengths. And these are probably the types of videos that you're maybe interested in doing, whether they're more YouTube kind of user-generated content or promotional videos across different social media platforms. And there's a million different film and documentary genres. Documentary is a genre of film. And that includes like nature documentaries, crime, like your Netflix shows like Tiger King, all these popular ones. And then you've got narrative scripted ones, which means that it's basically a much more planned production where you have to write a script, you have to have everything planned in advance. And that includes like action films, sci-fi, musical dramas, everything like that. And then you've kind of got the mix between the two, where you've got some reality blended in with scripted work, and that can be like your Kardashians, where you have some of it being real life, but a lot of it scripted for TV specifically. So those are very, very simple, kind of slimmed down versions of the film genre. And so for the massive films that you see in Hollywood nowadays, they film with cameras and equipment that's like $100,000. Massive cameras, a lot of the time filmed on celluloid film, if it's like for IMAX and things, or digital. And they also require like massive crews and things as well. And then you've got the lower tier below that. It's kind of like indie film or low budget films, still using amazingly good quality cameras, but a lot less expensive. Still pricey, but for the quality that you're getting for indie films, they're still pretty good. And then you've got the kind of documentary, and these are more kind of lightweight, portable, easy to kind of carry around, that have microphones, and you can often have lights attached to them and things. And these are £5,000 or less. The camera on the right there that you see is actually the camera that I use in all my kind of freelance work for the past few years. It's a Lumix GH5, and I really highly recommend it. It's a great wee camera. And then a lot of the time, you'll probably just be using like a pocket camera or your phone, which are the most inexpensive or cost-effective cameras that you can be using. And why wouldn't you use your phone for videos and stuff now, when they've got like 4K cameras and all these amazing capabilities nowadays? And so just very quickly talking about the resources that you need for like blockbusters of people and like state-of-the-art equipment. It costs like millions of dollars to put on a massive Hollywood production. You're probably going to be filming globally. And then you've got the indie film low budget, where you kind of got a small cast and crew. You're filming wherever it's possible, and you're trying to just cover a bit of pay for people with covering transport, food, and accommodation costs when it comes into play. And then documentary, you've kind of just got a very small crew unit. A lot of the time, you're just filming by yourself if you're like a solo filmmaker who's doing a documentary. So you're just kind of focusing on traveling and getting yourself accommodation and things if you're going across countries to make documentaries. Or a lot of the time, it's just a single person in a single location doing like a social media video for your small business, for personal use. Maybe you're an artist who's wanting to do art videos in their own studio and things like that, or anything else. And that's using any kind of cameras that you have. So just to give you some inspiration of some DIY filmmakers that have come in the past, here are some pretty cool stories from people who basically came out of the ether with their indie films and kind of broke into the Hollywood spectrum. So filmmakers like that include Robert Rodriguez, Gareth Edwards, and Steven Soderbergh. Robert Rodriguez, and this was in the 90s, bear in mind, but he was 23 years old and he made his first feature film for $7,000 with his friends and family. And that feature film got the attention of Hollywood, and he went on to direct films like Sin City or the Star Wars TV show that is on Disney Plus just now called The Mandalorian. So he's definitely up there. And another filmmaker called Gareth Edwards directed, filmed, and did his own visual effects on a film called Monsters. And that guerrilla style indie film. And what I mean by guerrilla style was basically they just went to America with a decent budget and filmed across South America. And they didn't have permits or anything like that. They just kind of wore high-vis vests and tried to get lucky and made a really good film. And he went on to direct Godzilla and Star Wars Rogue One. And then you've got Steven Soderbergh, who is really kind of famous for his Ocean's 11, 12, 13 films, Magic Mike, Contagion, and he's moved into filming on an iPhone. So here you've got this studio guy who came from indie film. He had an indie filmmaking background, but he sees the potential that you have with phones. So even people in Hollywood are now moving to this, especially if they have a DIY ethos about them as well. And that just kind of backs up how. So no matter what film you're making, the genre you're making in, or the equipment you're using, the process of making a film is always going to be fundamentally the same. And the process of filmmaking is basically split into three separate phases. You've got the pre-production planning phase, which then moves into production, which is your filming, recording any voiceovers and things like that. And then you've got post-production, which is editing it all together and then putting it out into the world. So here are some tips for and some techniques on pre-production. This stage is arguably like my favorite kind of stage, because you get to plan as much as you possibly can in advance. You get to kind of create the vision that you're wanting to do. No matter what video you're doing, if you're doing a longer form video or if you're doing like a very short clip for social media, it's always really good to take advantage of planning in advance. So if you've got any dialogue that you would like to have featured in the video, it's always best to kind of write a really rough script. It doesn't have to be amazingly polished. That is always really helpful to kind of have a script behind you, as well as listing any action or camera movement that you'd like to see. If you've got particular inspiration, if you want to just have nice, smooth camera movements, it's always kind of good to think about those in advance. And if you want people to be walking, moving from A to B, that sort of thing. And something that goes along with this is a storyboard or a shot list. And that includes like it doesn't have to be polished drawings or anything like that. It can just be stick figures, but it kind of gives you an idea of the look of what you're wanting to go for and the kind of different shots that you would like to capture. And you can also have a breakdown of the production. So if it's a smaller production that you're doing, maybe just by yourself, you might not be thinking about doing this. But if you're maybe wanting to travel on your own, to do like a travel video or something, it's always decent to have this kind of plan in place, to know what you're going to be spending with expenses and having a little budget in place. Or if you require and try and get some kind of schedule in place for shooting days and also editing days. So here are a couple of other ones that I find really helpful. Mood boards, which I feel like are often overlooked as well, but they're really good for visual inspiration and any references that you want to have for other videos that you feel are of a similar style at all. And also if you plan for post, that's also something that people don't think about as well. And what I mean by plan for post is just thinking about, okay, what am I going to be filming and how am I going to put it together in the end? So if you're wanting to use your phone to edit, is it easier to use your phone to film rather than use like a really high quality camera that has massive file sizes that is going to take up a lot of space on your phone? That's something that you can plan for advancing, obviously. Or if your phone has low storage anyway and you're filming on your phone, maybe you need to kind of plan for taking breaks throughout the shooting days to kind of offload footage so you can continue filming on your phone, that sort of thing. So those are just tips that I find really helpful and from experience have helped me. And so no matter what kind of film you're making as well, the production stage is always kind of going to be pretty tight for time, because often and more often than not, you're always going to be thinking when you're filming and getting ideas and inspiration on the spot when you're doing different things, and you're always chasing daylight and that sort of thing. So here's a couple of tips that will help you make your footage look a little bit more like high quality, no matter what camera you're using, and also a little bit more professional. And the first one is composition and framing. So really, just how you compose and frame a shot is really important to making it look higher quality or a little bit more visually pleasing. A lot of the time people rush into just putting the camera wherever they feel is a decent spot without really thinking a lot about the composition. But if you just allow yourself the time to think of, okay, does that shot look nice to me? Is it going to look nice once other things are added to it, like text or things like that? Just allow yourself that time to think about that and make the shot look as best as you can. And then lighting. So you kind of want to make sure that the subject of the video or the subject in the frame is the most well lit, especially if you're going for something like an interview or if you're just filming yourself. You kind of want yourself to be the main focus rather than like bright daylight overexposed behind you or things like that. And the other thing is camera movement to consider. So whether or not you want your camera to be moving is totally up to you. You can just have a nicely composed static shot. Or if you do want camera movement, there's a number of different ways that you can have it. You can either have it like handheld, which might result in a little bit of shake, but if you have a gimbal or a tripod, that can also help make it a bit more smooth. I'll come back to these techniques and show you a bit as well. So composition. Here's a video that I've just put together of some films that have been completely shot on phones. So this first one is a film called Unsane, which was made by Steven Soderbergh, one of the DIY filmmakers I was talking about. So this is an example of a technique called lead. Basically see that they've used the natural lines that they have in this location to pinpoint to where their subject is walking across the road. And that's a really basic like composition technique that works and just kind of makes your footage a little bit more visually pleasing. And it also directs the viewer's eye to whatever you want them to pay attention to or what you want them to focus on. So leading lines is a really helpful composition technique. And here it comes up again. So you can see like the office cubicles, the lights hanging down from the ceiling. All those things are kind of pointing to our subject in the middle of the frame. So there's a few different composition techniques in here as well. So this shot, another composition is using the grid. A lot of the time on your phone or on any other cameras, you can actually get the grid overlay. And that really kind of helps make sure that your footage is a bit more balanced. As you can see, it's kind of divided into 3x3. And so it allows like a lot of space in the top layer, and also the subjects are the focus in the bottom layer. and they're almost kind of silhouetted with the lighting from the big windows. And obviously the windows are divided into 3 panels as well. So that also makes the whole shot look a little bit more pleasing and a little bit more balanced. So that's like another helpful composition technique that I use a lot, is the grid on a lot of different projects that I work on. And so you'll probably see, like, now that you're aware of that, they use a lot of leading lines and things. This is something that's very similar to the grid, where they've divided it into 3, and it's basically the grid, but just divided into 3 simple lines called the rule of thirds. So you can see that the subject is just off of the right third, and on the left third, you've got the divide in the wall between bright and darkness. So it kind of balances the image out a little bit. Plus, they've also got leading lines in this shot as well, which direct you to the subject in the frame. So that's kind of the technicalities behind why some shots look visually pleasing. And believe it or not, this film was all shot on an iPhone as well. So it really doesn't matter what camera you're using, as long as you use good composition techniques, good lighting, nice camera movements, it'll look pretty professional. This is another film that was award-winning that came out a few years ago called Tangerine, and this was all shot on an iPhone as well. And they're using the same sort of techniques where you have the rule of thirds. This is an interesting setup, which is kind of handy if you're using an interview setup at all, or if it's more than one shot between 2 people. So you can have someone on the left third, a subject, with a grid, and you can also then cut to a shot where someone's on the right third. And basically what this does is just, it's a really simple technique where people want to let the viewer have a bit of awareness of the space. So instead of us cutting from this shot to the previous one, and they're both on the same side of the frame, they've made it so that these subjects are on opposite sides of the frame. And that's just like very simple film language, basically, that makes it a little bit more understanding and easy for the viewer to follow. And also, like, a technique that they've used is using as much natural lighting as they possibly can. They're obviously in a really sunny place in America, so they're getting lots of nice kind of warm colors. Unfortunately, we don't get that a lot in this country. So yeah, that's maybe something to consider as well. Do you want to be filming it where it's all dull a lot of the time, or do you want to be choosing locations that are sunny, like this one as well? So this was shot last year on the iPhone 12. You can actually see in the shot that they're using the phone with like a steady gimbal. Let me put that back there. So bring that back here. You can see that they're using the iPhone 12 with like a steady gimbal there. So basically what that does is just like remove any camera shake that they have if they were to do it handheld. So that means like everything you're seeing here is probably all filmed on that gimbal with the iPhone or on a tripod. And they've obviously got beautiful natural landscapes to be using with lovely natural daylight. And they're just using like a bunch of different techniques to make their shots look really nice. This was filmed on the most recent iPhone, so obviously it's going to have the best camera around. But basically the techniques are still the same. They're just making sure that the lighting is nice, their composition is cool, and so it all works. And this was a very cool thing that I thought was very, very smart. They just made like this glass enclosure so that they could film underwater for the iPhone. It's a little bit risky for like a brand new iPhone 12, but I thought it was cool. It's just another DIY method. And this film as well, I just wanted to bring it up because this was shot vertically. So a lot of the time when you see films, they're always horizontal, you know. but vertical is what we always look at on our phones pretty much, like on TikTok, on Instagram stories, when you're scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, you're always looking at the phone screen vertically. So a lot of people have kind of been experimenting with that idea and composing shots where they've basically just cut the screen in half to do nicely composed shots vertically. And I think it works really well. And that's just another way that you can use your phone as well. Don't feel like you always have to have it horizontal, because a lot of the time people are going to be looking at their phones vertically anyway. So that's something that you can consider as well during the production process. And just to prove, like I've also done a film a couple of years ago on an old iPhone, which didn't have like the most amazing camera, but I went out and shot it with one of my acting friends in Glasgow with some cool lights and that going on in the city. So yeah, this is a standard lighting technique. Now, I know you might be looking at this and thinking like, what's going on? But basically, it's a really simple lighting technique where you have 3 points of light. They don't have to be professional lighting equipment. It doesn't have to be like actual bought lights. They can be practical lights. And what I mean by that is just a lamp or, you know, a little desk light that you have. And to give you an idea, this is the results that the 3-point lighting setup basically gives you. So you can start off there with the main light, the light that is hitting your subject the most. But sometimes with just that one light, you can get quite harsh shadows. So sometimes you want to bring in another light that will soften the shadows. And then you kind of want them to be separated from the background. So both of these subjects and these photos have quite dark hair. Particularly the subject up top, they have really, really dark hair. And so by putting a light against the background, they're managing to create a nice kind of soft separation there between the background and the subject. And below as well, they've started off with a completely black background with the subject in shadow. And by putting a light on the background, it kind of creates a nice separation between them and the subject. And they've only got one big light and a little soft light on the edge. And that's just a really, really simple lighting technique that just makes your footage a little bit more visually pleasing. And so another thing that I'd like to talk about is sound. Basically, sound is like the most overlooked thing when you're doing filmmaking. And so sound is super important. And a lot of the time it's argued that sound and music are half of what a film is, which I totally agree with. A lot of the time when you're watching a film, you can have decent visuals, or sometimes you can have poor visuals where you have like out of focus shots or shaky camera footage. But the thing that you get away with the most is using good quality audio or nice music. And you can fix your audio situation if you don't have a decent microphone or something that will be able to give you nice quality audio. I highly recommend just getting a microphone that can either plug into your camera, one that can plug straight into your phone, and that provides you with good quality sound. Because it's definitely something that is overlooked a lot of the time, and something that I feel makes your videos look a lot more professional and high quality when you have good sound. So here's a quick tech tip for filming on your phone. So basically, this is just to show you that a lot of the time people don't realize that they can change a lot of the settings on their phone. So this is a shot from my iPhone. And if you go into settings, you can go into camera and you can choose all these different settings. I will show you a practical version of this in a few minutes because I'm going to be moving on to my phone screen in a little while. But you can do this on Android as well. This isn't just iPhone. I think you have to go into the camera app itself on Androids. but it's basically the same thing. You just want to go into the camera settings and you can choose the best quality settings. Right now, the best quality that you're probably going to have on your phone is 4K, and that just means that it's the most high quality resolution that you're going to achieve. And I don't want to confuse people if they don't understand frame rates or anything like that. But all you need to know is that in the UK, our native frame rate is 25 frames per second. And that just means that you're capturing 25 frames every second. So I'll come back to that in a minute, but I don't want to confuse anyone with those kind of technicalities if you're not familiar with them. And so now we've kind of come to post-production. And I just want to kind of point out a couple of different video editing softwares that are really handy, because this is the stage where your film starts to take shape, it starts to come to life, and you start to see what the final result will look like. And the software that I use the most is Adobe Premiere Pro. The reason I like to use that one is because if you're a designer or if you have files that are in Photoshop or anything like that, those Photoshop files are compatible with Premiere Pro. And so if you want to bring in things layer by layer or start to create little animations or anything like that with your logos, Premiere Pro is pretty much the place to do that. So that's my kind of editing software of choice. But you also have the Apple equivalent, which is Final Cut Pro. And that's also a really good professional editing software. It has a lot of differences from Premiere Pro, but it's still very good quality, and a lot of industry people continue to use that. But the one below Final Cut Pro is kind of like a basic version of Final Cut Pro is iMovie, which I'm sure a lot of you will have used before if you have, Apple products or MacBooks or anything like that and are familiar with doing little video edits. You might have tried it before, but iMovie is still like a really good basic video editing software that gets the job done to create high quality videos. And it's basically a stripped down version of Final Cut for beginners. So that's still a really good software to use. And so we're moving into the mobile video editing stage just now. So the app that we're going to be talking about today is Adobe Premiere Rush, which is basically just Premiere Pro, but for your phone. It's free to download. It should be available on all platforms, but if it's not, don't worry. There's a bunch of video editing alternatives that you can check out online. So I'm just going to move over to the phone screen just now. So I hope that's kind of been followed okay by everyone so far. And here's a couple of shots that I've done on my phone today that we're going to be looking at. We're basically just going to be doing a sequence where I filmed kind of making a cup of tea. So it's a really kind of fun, straightforward sequence where we're taking a couple of bits of footage and we're bringing them into Adobe Premiere Rush. So what you want to do is just go into Premiere Pro or Premiere Rush, I should say. Now you don't have to follow along with this at all. It can just be, very straightforward. You can just kind of watch me as I go along. And so Adobe Premiere Rush is really, really intuitive and dead easy. You just kind of want to bring in your footage. So here's all my footage that I've shot that I would like to bring in. And you basically just select all of these and bring them into the edit. Now I'm just going to call this test project 1 and create. So Premiere will bring those into an editing timeline. So what you're going to do is just kind of like look through your footage and just make sure that everything's okay. This is just to give you a very quick look at what the app looks like. So I'm just basically scrolling along the bottom timeline and I can see all the footage and that happening in the top half of the screen. And what's really good about this program is that right along the bottom, and you should be able to see some icons start to move along the bottom there. You have things like graphics. You can have like different color effects. You can also change the speed of your video. And you can also do audio effects as well, and much more. So it's a really kind of handy user intuitive app. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and strip the audio from these takes because I don't want to have the sound of these audios. So you can just tap and hold, and this allows you to separate the audio or expand the audio. I'm just going to separate the audio for every one of these and get rid of the audio. So this is also something that you can do if you're wanting to do like a fashion video or even like a music video, or if you're just wanting to do a product video. Maybe you've got something of your own business that you're just wanting to have covered. This is also something that you can do, is just remove the audio and then add music in as well. So it's a really handy thing to have. So I'm just removing the audio from these. So it's dead simple. And if you're not familiar with video editing, please don't freak out, because once you've kind of got to use one video editing software, once you get introduced to a new one, it is pretty straightforward, even though it might not seem that way. So the last video clip here that I've got is just a shot of myself where I'm doing a little bit of chatting. And that's basically just going to act as the voiceover for my video. And so I don't want to see myself here. So what I can do is just do what I've done for each time before, is just separate the audio. I can bring the audio a little bit along from that shot. And if I don't want to see myself, I can just delete this. But I've got the audio there. So all I'm doing is I'm just selecting the audio and I'm going to drag it all the way along to the beginning of the video. And that's going to be the introduction. So now I'm just going to edit a couple of these clips. Now, what I did there is when you move along your clip, when you think you would like it to stop, you basically just hold that edge and you drag it. So I'm just doing this just by dragging the edge to a point where I would like it to stop. You can also use shots like this that are just a static shot. Maybe I want to add a title. So I want to come down to the bottom here where there's all these different effects. And I want to select graphics and add a graphic. And these are all the titles that you have that you can use. I'm just going to go very basic and just use one of these ones. Cool. So now I've got the title that comes up on screen there. Hope that's not too small for you to see. But you basically select the title and it's just like as simple as typing a text. You just want to put in whatever title you would like. Making a cup of tea. That's all I'm going to call this video. There you go. And so a lot of these things just appear on the screen as so. So I kind of want that to start a little bit early. So all I'm going to do is just drag that along and start it there. Now, one of the things that you can do as well, if you don't want this to just appear on screen, you can come down to the effects panel here. Make sure that this text is selected and not the clip underneath or anything like that. Make sure that you've just touched that text there. And you've got all these different effects that are transitions. And I'm just going to do a dissolve for this, which basically just means that it has a nice soft dissolve coming on and off. So really, really simple. And I don't want this clip to last that long. So you can either continue to drag along just to see where you want it to stop.
Patrick.
And have it stop about there.
Patrick.
Yeah.
Maria has a question for you.
Yeah.
In the chat.
Will we have access to notes afterwards? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I've got a little note that I'll be putting up.
It's the one about the title. Does the title need to be placed at the top, or should it be at the beginning? Does it matter?
It really just kind of depends on your personal preference. You know, if you're wanting to have a title right at the beginning or towards the end, that's totally up to you. It depends if you're wanting to have, you can have a title just completely on its own, or if you're just wanting the video to be completely visual with no text at all, that's totally fine. I was just using this as a little bit of an example to give you a title. So if I just scroll along here, I can see the different kind of shots that we'll be working with. And all of these are just shot on my phone. So just doing the sequence here. There you go, getting the little click of the kettle. Now, a lot of the time, if you want to see the full timeline, you can just use your fingers to pinch, just like you do when you're looking at photos or like zooming into different things. And that can also help when you're wanting to drag the beginning of a clip to a certain position like that, just to make it a little bit easier for you're not dragging the whole length of the video. Cool. So basically, we're just going to be using like the same sort of things throughout this entire little clip here. And it's really just this sort of easy to start putting your clip together in this timeline. A little editing thing that might be quite cool is because I'm pouring water in this shot and I'm also pouring water in this shot, I don't want it to start and stop. I can just go from pouring water to pouring water, just like that. And it should kind of seamlessly just continue on. It's not the most exciting of things watching someone make a cup of tea, but it's basically just to kind of give you an example. And what's happened here as well, and this might just be a little bit handy thing as well. This is going to be the final shot that I'd like. But beforehand, we have the shot of having the tea bag taken out of the mug. And all I want to do is I want this to be the last shot. So I'm just going to touch and drag it to the end here. So here we have like very, very kind of simple, straightforward video. To make it a little bit more interesting for social media, you can also add text, or I should say music. You can also add music in this app. Now this app, if you want to come down to audio, you can have a lot of different audio effects. But there's a little plus button here on the left-hand side called Browse, just on the bottom left-hand corner. And there's a search bar. Now, because this is Adobe, you can also pay to like up the plan of the app. I think it's like £10 a month or something like that. Because some of the premium music that you want to use is going to be priced differently. But I'm just going to type in free. And all the free music that comes up on this app will appear when you search for free, which is pretty handy. And it also has like a bunch of different musical genres that you're going to want to use, from rock to like cinematic things to jazz, no matter what kind of video vibe that you're wanting to go for. But a genre that I find is probably most suitable for like easygoing social media videos, YouTube vlogs, things like that, is if you just type in smooth. And that seems to be like a decent, remove free, and then type in smooth. And that seems to be a decent kind of collection of free tunes that are kind of a little bit more like kind of happy music, I suppose. So I'm probably going to want to have one of these come through. So I'm just going to play some of these and see if you can hear any of these as examples. So I think that's like going to be pretty good to kind of put over a cup of tea. So I'm just going to add this. So let's just see how this looks. Hello everyone, welcome to the filmmaking workshop, and today we're going to be looking at making a cup of tea. Now, sometimes if the music is a little bit too loud for you, one thing you can do is just tap to select the music, and along here on the bottom, there's a bunch of different effects, but one just says clip volume. So you want to drag that, and that's basically just a volume dial. You can bring up or down if you want it to be louder or lower. I kind of want it to be a little bit lower, just so it's not so kind of poppy or bassy. Or if you want to add like another voiceover, you don't want it to be overpowering your voice. So I'm just going to do that. Hello everyone, welcome to the filmmaking workshop, and today we're going to be looking at making a cup of tea. Great. So I don't want the music to last that long, obviously. So you can either zoom out again to drag, or one of the easier ways that you can do it is just to go to the point where you want the music to stop. And along the bottom here, if you come right to the end, you see a pair of scissors. So just make sure that the audio is selected, press the scissors, and it cuts the audio in half. And you can basically just delete this version here. There you go. So that's where the audio stops. So for this example, I'm just going to export it now because I feel like it's it's good enough for like an Instagram post or something, or if you're doing anything else on Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. All you want to do is on the top right-hand corner, there's a little button in the middle there between the undo button and what looks like a little chat bubble. So the one in the top right-hand corner in the middle, you just want to click that, and this is where you can export it basically. What's really good about this app is that you can export it in like a bunch of different settings that are most favorable to you. If you want it to be like really high quality at 4K, you can do that. Or if you just want it to be exported at like HD quality, you can do that as well. So I'm just going to export it at HD. and it's doing a pretty quick job. A lot of the time when you're doing it on the computer, that it might take a little bit longer. So the fact that it's doing this is pretty good. There, and then it's just told me that that's been saved to my camera roll, and you can share it to like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or anything else from there. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I can just kind of come out of this sequence now. So if I go to the top left-hand corner here, I can see like other projects that I've been doing. So there's the test project that I've done. And I've also got another one where I've taken some of my DSLR footage and put some new music over the bottom of it. So this is like an example of some of it. And that's just music that is like free on the app as well. So you can get some really nice kind of jazzy, decent quality stuff. So that's basically it. The one thing that I was going to show you to do with your camera settings is if I just come out of this and go into my settings here. So I can just scroll down on my phone settings to the bit where the camera comes up, just to kind of show you a bit further on what I was talking about earlier. So your camera on your phone, like a lot of smartphones has amazing quality cameras now that you can basically do a bunch of different frame rates at and a bunch of different resolutions. And that gives you a lot of power just to make really good quality professional stuff on your phone. So if I come into the bit that says record video, which is just this bit, this is giving me all the options of the frame rates that I want to do. Now, if you're wanting to do just normal speed, like no slow motion, that is absolutely fine. 4K at 25 frames per second, that's your best bet for really good looking, smooth kind of normal motion. But if you would like to do slow motion, instead of like having a slow motion setting on your phone, you can just film at 4K around 60 frames. And what this does is basically just doubles your frame rate, or more than doubles your frame rate. And then what you can do in the editing software is half the speed. So that's a technique that you can do that you don't have to worry about too much, because with iPhones and other phones, they normally have slow motion inbuilt as like a setting when you're switching between your photo to your video, whatever you want to capture. And so there's some really pretty cool stuff where you're recording in different formats, best suited to what you're going to edit in. And you can also record in really good quality sound from your phone already. So if you've got an additional mic, that's going to be really, really helpful for you as well. Cool. So if we just come back into the Keynote at the minute, let me just bring up my options here again. Cool. Nice. Let me just get rid of that X there. There we go. Nice one. Cool. So I just wanted to direct you on to like a few more resources that I find are really, really helpful when you're specifically working with your iPhone or your mobile devices. And one of those is the iPhone Photography School. And they talk about composition. They talk about like the lenses that you have, the formats that you use on your phone. And they've got like a website, a YouTube channel where you can talk about all these different things. They're really, really helpful, and they're transferable between both photography and video. So I'd highly recommend checking out iPhone Photography School. Also, Film Riot, if you're into filmmaking or doing stuff like DIY filmmaking in that, That's like a really kind of creative, entertaining, and inspirational YouTube channel. They do a lot of stuff about using your phone to create really professional looks. And someone who isn't overly well known, but he's definitely getting there, is a guy called Jamie Windsor. He does amazing photography videos and essays where he talks about composition and just really insightful tips on taking good photos. And I find that that language of photography can definitely be easily translated to whatever device you're using, as well as films and using videos instead of photography. Another person is Dan Mace, who does more creative things with DIY filmmaking. And then someone else is called D for Darius, who does really good DIY filmmaking stuff as well. So all those resources, I've also listed them in a PDF document, which I'll just upload to the chat in a little moment. But those are really helpful, especially the iPhone Photography School, for when you're wanting to do things on your phone specifically. So 25 frames is basically just like the native frame rate that we have here. The fact that there's like a difference between 25 frames in the UK and 30 frames in America is purely down to TV broadcasting. Basically, that's how the different countries broadcast over their television networks. But 60 frames per second, the best way to describe it is if I film something, or if you film something in 25 frames per second, that you then would like to make half speed to do slow motion. A lot of the times you're then reducing the amount of frames to 12 frames per second, which kind of makes a little bit of a jittery, jarring motion rather than like the smooth motion that you see in normal frame rate. So basically all you're doing by upping it to 60 frames is you're basically doubling the frame rate from 25 to 50 or 60. And so when you bring it half in the editing software, it makes half the frames smooth, if that makes sense. So 25 frames per second makes everything smooth, but if you half it, it's 12 frames, which makes everything kind of jittery because you've got half the amount of frames going past. Whereas if you up it to 60 frames, you double it, you half it in the post, you're back down to 30, 25 frames, even though things are in slow motion. That's the smooth motion. If you're wanting really, really high frame rate slow motion, the setting that you have on your iPhone when you're filming in the slow motion setting on your camera, that's around 180 frames or like 240 frames per second that the iPhone automatically slows down and divides by whatever number that would be to make it all kind of work and smooth and appear as normal frame rate, even though everything's slow motion. So yeah, it does start getting into a little bit more of like the technical stuff when you start thinking about frame rates and that sort of thing. But a lot of the time, your phone kind of takes care of it for you. I wouldn't say it should use much more battery. If you go onto your camera settings, just as I was showing you guys there, there's actually some information in small writing at the bottom of that screen that tells you the benefits and the storage of how much 4K at such and such a frame rate takes up on your phone, like how much storage that would take up, as opposed to HD like 1080, which is less storage. But it doesn't really say anything about battery power. So off of the top of my head, when I've been filming with 4K, it doesn't change my battery percentage a huge amount as opposed to filming just normal HD. So you should be okay. Like you should be fine to film at 4K for a decent amount of time, depending on how good your battery life is anyway.